All right, so let's talk about where my, oh, this is a great start. I closed my slides so that I could email them. And now I need to go find them and open them up again. One sec. Be right there.
Take your
Talk amongst
time.
yourselves. Somebody mentioned Alone. We've been watching the latest season of Alone. It's one of our favorite TV shows. I feel terrible sitting on a couch while those people are struggling, but I guess that's the point, right? There we go. First, before I get into this, I want to say thank you for being part of a Tableau user group. I do competitive presentations with customers, and one of the main points that I make is that there's been for 15 plus years now, because Tableau has this core of VizQL. It's fun, it's beautiful, it's very powerful. We've had this positive feedback loop of people understanding Tableau, becoming fans of Tableau, evangelizing Tableau, becoming part of the community, giving Tableau feedback. I was with Microsoft for over 20 years, and that slips in once in a while. Giving Tableau feedback, going to TC, just this positive feedback loop that's been going for 15 years now. And, on behalf of Tableau, thank you so much. We love you. We're proud of you. Thanks for being Tableau users and customers. This is a huge deal. Relationships, not interpersonal relationships, although they are a huge deal, but relationships in Tableau that shipped in 2020. That's me. Relationships used to be called, internally they were nicknamed object model, and then shortly before we were going to ship, they were called the data model. Neither of which were really an appropriate label for the technology, for the capability. And relationships makes a lot more sense, and we'll hopefully talk about that. I'll send these, you'll get these slides with these links after the presentation, but let me just go through some resources real quick that you can use as homework. Bethany Lyons is a senior product manager at Tableau. She may have spoken here before. She was invited to do this, and she wasn't available, so she suggested that I, her understudy, present. So sorry for that. She's a lot smarter than I am, but I'll do my best. She has written a couple of blog posts for Tableau.com on relationships. This part 1 talks about 8 different semantics, 8 different rules that are internal to relationships. And Bethany always does a fantastic job of explaining difficult technical concepts. And I usually have to read her stuff early in the morning when I'm sharpest in order to be able to keep up with it. This part 2, tips and tricks, I didn't know about until I started preparing for this. And I read it, and I was blown away by some of these. There's one here that you really need to pay attention to. Improve query performance of dashboard filters. I'm actually going to reach out to a customer that I talked to last week about this specific one, because it seems like it could make a huge difference. So be sure that you read Bethany's blog posts. There's an article here in Help about the Tableau data model. There's how relationships differ from joins. There's an overview of what we did in 2020.2. This is Bethany's TC19 talk. This was at the end of the week. I was, I think bedraggled is a good word, because I had my first TC was TC19, and I presented 6 times. And I sat in the back of the room for this talk, and it was fantastic. So I encourage you to consume that. This is a very brief product group presentation that gives a great overview of what relationships are and what they do. And then this guy, Tableau Tim, has a fantastic British accent, and I hope to emulate what he did in this presentation. But if you don't latch on the first time, go watch this presentation. I think he did a fantastic job of covering what relationships are. So why have we built relationships? I won't talk about why it took so long, but why did we build relationships? Well, since the beginning of time, Tableau has stored data, whether you queried a single Excel spreadsheet or whether you queried 19 different related tables and pulled them together um, uh, as one result set. Tableau internally has stored that data as a rectangle, as a single table, as a flattened data set. And that's the way 80% of applications, 90%, 99% of applications in the world store data. If you've ever used Python and you've used a pandas data frame, it's a rectangle. No matter how many queries, no matter how many tables you query to get it, it's still a data frame. It's still a rectangle. An Excel spreadsheet is the same kind of thing unless you do a bunch of work with VLOOKUPs. This is the first way that an application developer represents data internally to an application. We've needed to move beyond this as Tableau for a while. We've been working on this for years. We needed to get it right. We needed to make it performant. We needed to make it usable. And I think we've done that. It shipped first in 2020.2, and we'll continue to sort of turn crank, as you might imagine, and add features and capabilities and ease of use improvements and that sort of thing to it. So if in 2020.1 and prior, you want to viz flat data, you want to build a viz on a Tableau data set, you need to accommodate the fact that the data that you're trying to analyze from a specific table might not be at the finest grain of detail in that data set. And so you might have repeated records, and you might need to use a level of detail expression in order to accommodate that, in order to fix that problem. So let me illustrate that by going into Tableau. I'm actually using 2020.2. When you pull in, this is an aside, when you pull in a prior to relationship data source, when you open up a prior to 2020.2 Tableau file, you're going to see a single node in your data source here. And that is where your migrated data sits. That's where your legacy data model sits. And if you double click into that, or you click the down arrow and click open, then you'll have, the view that you're used to. I have a data set here. Zoom, there we go. So I have 4 records. I have 4 tables in SQL Server. I have a customer. I guess I should back up a couple of steps. There is a bookstore data set that there's a link to in the PowerPoint. You can pull down that bookstore data set, go through the tutorials, and it will give you a great feel, hands-on for what relationships are and what they do. I wanted to build something that is as simple as possible as a data set, in order that the complexity of the database itself is not getting in the way of customers grasping what relationships are and what they do. So I built this. It's a veterinary clinic database. It's completely fictitious data. I've got one customer, Ginger. Ginger has paid $1,350 total to this vet clinic. I have one animal, Spot, and you can see the relationship there on customer ID to Ginger. Spot weighs 35 pounds. Spot has had 3 appointments. There are only 3 appointments in this data set. Spot's had 3 appointments, and the billings for those appointments total $700. And in those 3 appointments, that first appointment, there were 2 prescriptions. One was heartworm medication, and the other was some skin cream. Second appointment ID 2, some flea and tick medication. And the third appointment, apparently Scott hurt themselves, so painkillers and antibiotics were prescribed. And I think that number is $650. The total prescription billing number is $650. So that is the database that we're working against for this little demonstration. And so I've got my customer, and these are actually views because got a little bit more data in the database that we'll go to later if we have time. I've got my customer associated with animal on customer ID, associated with appointment, associated with prescription. And you notice here, I've got my rectangular data set. Prescriptions, if I scroll over here to the right, prescription is the finest grain of detail. There are 5 prescription records. So there are 5 records all the way across. And you notice that ginger appears 5 times. Total billings of 1,350 appear 5 times, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For many of you who are old hands at Tableau, not saying that you're old, you look terrific. For many of you who are old hands at Tableau, this is elementary stuff, and I apologize, but I wanted to start at the beginning in order to help everyone come up to speed. So if I ask Tableau, if I walk up to Tableau and I say, hey, what are the animals? There's Spot, and how much do they weigh? And I put it in the right place. I see that Spot weighs 175 pounds. Spot needs to go on a diet. So if you've worked with Tableau in the past, you know that the fact that we're summing weight for every animal here is the problem. And what we need to do to get around that is we need to write a level of detail expression. And here's my level of detail expression. That is not the right one. Animal weight. Here's my level of detail expression. I'm fixing customer ID and animal ID and asking for either the average or the minimum or the maximum, some expression that's going to isolate one value. And if I grab animal weight and bring that out here as well, then if I put it in the right place again, I get 35 pounds, which is the correct answer. Okay. So I can do the same kind of thing with customer and where's appointment? Appointment billings. So appointment billings here says that it's $1,200. Actual customer billings, if I bring out the level of detail expression, is $700. So let's go take a look at what happens in relationships, or using relationships. There we go. What we're doing with Tableau and relationships is, rather than storing the data internally within Tableau as a rectangle, as a single denormalized or flattened data set, is we're storing each one of the tables individually. And we're asking you to define, instead of defining static joins between the individual tables, we're asking you to define relationships between those tables. So let me get rid of this prescription view, and I'll bring back the prescription view again. This is called the noodle. I don't think you'll find that in the documentation, but that's what we call it internally. And Tableau has figured out correctly that we want to relate appointment to prescription on appointment ID. You notice when I click on customer, I see the customer table. When I click on animal, I see the animal table. When I click on appointment, you get the idea. I see the appointment table. Tableau is now maintaining these individual relational tables individually, internally. So if I go to sheet 1 here, and I grab customer name, and I ask about appointment billings, I get $700, which is correct, without needing a level of detail expression. Because what we're doing over here is we're saying, hey, Tableau, if you need to relate customer and appointment, this relationship defines how I want you to relate customer and appointment. I'm not telling you to do an inner join. I'm not telling you to do a left outer join or a right outer join. I'm telling you this is the relationship. You make the best decision at the time that the viz needs to be materialized as to what the join type should be, what the join should be. And Tableau does that. Without level of detail expressions, you can get the right answers the first time, every time. So if I go grab animal weight, in case you don't believe me, animal name and weight. Spot weighs 35 pounds. He's gone on a diet. So there we go. Let's talk about, so that's sort of the first introduction to relationships. We maintain all the tables individually inside Tableau. We ask you to define relationships rather than defining static joins. And given those relationships that are defined, Tableau makes the right choice at the time at the time the viz is materialized as to what the appropriate join should be. Make sense? I'm seeing some indication of chats going along. Is there anything that I should stop and address, or should I just keep going?
I'm taking a look now.
The one thing that I think is worth addressing is Ivana was saying, you should call it a VLOOKUP to go after the Excel user base, but I think it's worth pointing out this is drastically different than a VLOOKUP. So maybe, Larry, if we got a handful of folks kind of coming from that Excel world, could you just kind of very quickly kind of help everyone understand what the difference between what you're showing here and kind of the VLOOKUP and the way the two would operate?
Huh. It's been probably a decade since I've done a VLOOKUP.
I bet Nelson can get into it.
You want me? I can take a swipe, yeah. And then Larry, maybe you correct me when I get it wrong. Yeah, so
sounds good.
What happens with a VLOOKUP is that the Excel is looking for a particular value, and then the very first time it finds it, it's going to return back to you whatever, what you want, some number of columns shifted over from one place to another. The difference between that and what you're going to get with a database, if you were doing a true join, would be that it's not going to do it just for the first one. It's going to do it for every single time that it sees that value. And that's part of the challenge, and kind of what Larry was showing at the beginning, is that if it has that same value, think about state, for example. If you had a table that had 50 rows of the population of the state, and then you had transactions and state was in that, if you brought in the population of the state, it would show that number, X number of times for every time you had a transaction. If you sum that, then you get some number that doesn't mean anything. And that's what Larry was kind of showing at the beginning. I think the beautiful thing is, Larry, with the relationships, you have the ability to kind of say, this is a many to many, or it's a many to one, or it's a one to many, or a one to one. And so Tableau can smartly kind of say, okay, hey, I only have kind of one population piece here. And I know that, if you're trying to do, the sum of revenue spent divided by the population of a state, now Tableau is going to smartly do that. But it's a much smarter thing that is happening than a VLOOKUP, which is kind of VLOOKUP is very simple. What this is doing, in some ways, the result would be the same, but this is a smarter process, if you will.
Yeah, this is automating something that, and actually, that was one of the, I sort of abandoned my slides, but that was one of the slides that you'll see. I've got a little robot there building the relationships for you in one of the slides. In prior versions of Tableau, go back to the flat version of this data set. In prior versions of Tableau, as we talked about, you statically join the data sets. You build a static join between two tables, and you can specify a left or a right or a full outer or an inner join. What relationships does is actually it defaults to full outer, and then it optimizes down from there. Let's get into that a little bit. I'm actually going to switch. So I'm on the sort of flat view here, and I'm going to switch over to a view of a larger database. So I'm going to show you that right here. It's the same tables, but it's just more records. And hopefully this makes sense. I've added a couple of customers. I've added Blair and Albert. Notice that Albert, if you look down at the animal table, there is no customer ID 3 in the animal table. I've added a couple of animals. There's Patch and Sparkles. And you notice that Sparkles doesn't have a customer. So I've got Sparkles and Albert aren't related, but I've got a customer in here that doesn't currently have any animals. There might be somebody who's come in hoping to foster a kitten, or somebody who, whose cat is whose animal is no longer with us. And then I've got an animal here, Sparkles, who is a Pacific Northwest Sasquatch, weighs 460 pounds. Obviously, Sasquatches don't have owners. Everybody knows that. So we've got null values. If we build a relationship between those two tables, that customer table and that animal table, if we do it with an inner join, guess what? We're not going to see Albert. We're not going to see Sparkles. We've got a set of appointments here. Animal ID 3. So appointment 6 was Sparkles, and we didn't charge Sparkles anything. And then appointment 6, is prescription 9, 365 doses of hair detangler for $4,200. That was what we charged Sparkles. So let's go back to our flat, our data model or our Tableau instance that shows us the pre-2012 data. And I will select all, and I'll go over to data source, and I'll show you. I double click in here. You see the same data source that we had: customer, animal, appointment, prescription. We've got inner joins between all of them. And you notice we have a Spot and Patch, 2 animals. You notice that we have Blair and Ginger, 2 owners. Albert and Sparkles are not in our data set. And if this were a bank, we would have accounts that we might have accounts that don't currently have an owner. We wouldn't know that money exists. We might have owners. We might have account owners that we might want to contact to see why they don't have an account right now. It could be a marketing opportunity, and it would be lost, because if we do for example, if we ask for all the customer names, yeah, we only get Blair and Ginger. Even if I, go get what a Blair and Ginger's animals weigh. Of course, we need to build an LOD expression for that, but you get the idea. We're losing data unless we build this as an outer join, a full outer join, and then we build connections over to appointment and prescription as well. We need to do some extra work to pull Albert and Sparkles into our analysis. Now let's go take a look at the example that I prepared with relationships. I'll go get all the data. Make sure I've done that correctly. Yes, we have all the prescriptions, all the customers, all the animals. So if I go to a new data sheet, if I go to a new sheet and I ask for animal names, I ask for customer names. Actually, that's interesting. If I ask for animal weights, there we go. There's Sparkles. I can see, I can view this data even though an inner join might not return all the data that I wanted to see. And I just inadvertently came across a demonstration of a couple of examples of dynamic join types that Tableau shows us. So I'm going to go back a couple of steps here. And you notice that I've asked for customer names and animal names, but I haven't actually pulled out any metrics, any measures onto the into the viz. And so all Tableau is doing right now is it's showing us dimensions that have values that are connected. If I want to actually show values, if I want to show both relationships and null relationships, I actually need to bring measures into the viz. And so when I bring in the total billings measure, Albert has a total billings record and Sparkles has a weight record. And so Tableau made different decisions based on different decisions of which join type to use based on what I was actually asking in the viz. And so this is something that you get to understand in Tableau 2020.2 and later as to how relationships work and how you can do this kind of thing. And there are a couple of tips and tricks that Bethany has documented in one of those blog posts that will show you that as well. One interesting aspect that's possibly more of an enterprise type topic has to do with queries. So I'm going to go here to help, settings and performance, and I'm going to say start performance recording. And then I'm going to ask for, customer name and maybe appointment billings. Go to show me and say date. There we go. So now I've asked for customers' appointments. I haven't asked for anything from this prescriptions table. I'll go here, settings of performance, stop performance recording. And that's going to think for a second and come back with a report of exactly what happened. Let's go do the same thing in relationships or with relationships. Start performance recording. And ask for customer name and appointment billings. There we go. Help, settings of performance, stop performance recording. Okay, now let's take a look at what happened over here. I executed this query, and the query, despite the fact that I didn't ask anything about prescriptions, we had to cross the animal table, if you remember, in order to get from customer to appointment, but we didn't ask about anything on the prescriptions table. You notice here that our select statement hits customer, animal, appointment, and prescription. Why is that? That's because we're going to denormalize this data set. We need to get the whole rectangle in order to bring back this data set. So we need to hit Tableau prior to 2020.2, prior to relationships, needs to hit every table in the data set for every query. Now, you might be able to anticipate where I'm going with this. Existing query, there we go. We hit appointment, animal, customer. We did not hit prescription with that viz because we needed to cross animal in order to get from appointment to customer, but we didn't ask anything about prescriptions. So Tableau didn't touch the prescription table. That could potentially be a big win from a performance perspective if you're hitting a large data warehouse, if you're hitting a fact table that you don't necessarily need to hit all the time. Now let's talk about a couple of things that you probably ought to know. Say you have an export from some production system in your organization, and you've got in that export, it's exporting monthly files into or weekly files into a directory somewhere, and you need to pull those files in to and union them to build a table. To do so, you would click here and say convert to union. And what that'll do is it'll ask you, bring it up a dialog where it asks you if you want specific tables or if you want to specify a wildcard. You would say in this directory, everything that's .csv, that's what I want to pull in. And as long as those files are shaped the same, hey, Tableau is going to handle that. That's how you do that in the relationships view in 2020.2 and later. Let's say that you've got some information about prescriptions, maybe the cost of prescriptions so that you can maybe calculate the profit of each one of these prescriptions, and you'd like to join that data in. You can, this is the, we call the conceptual view of these tables, or the virtual view of these tables. If you want to get to the physical definition of a table, that's when you open up that table's virtual definition. This enables you to describe the physical makeup of that table. So now if I want to bring in medical details here, I get the sort of old school view. I want to create an inner join between prescription name and prescription name here because I'm lazy and I didn't build a join key. And now I might say, you know what? I've got I've already got a prescription name field, so I don't need to see that. So I'll go ahead and hide that. All right, so now I've got my cost measure as well as my prescription billing measure. And so I can subtract the two and get a profit number for each prescription. In order to get out of this view, you click the X. And now this symbol, so this symbol here indicates a union, and this symbol here indicates that this virtual table definition is actually made up of a join inside there. Does that make sense?
It does. And
Okay.
I think it might be good if we would take a quick moment here to kind of ask for questions and begin to kind of wrap.
All right. Sounds good.
Unless you have like maybe one more slide, but there've been some good questions over on the chat.
Nope, I think I covered all of it.
Cool. One thing, I think you touched on this, but maybe since you got your screen up, if you could just kind of show, there's kind of some questions around, well, hey, you know, I used to be able to do this, and now I'm concerned that I'm not going to be able to kind of do the old way of kind of doing the data with joins and stuff like that. Could you just kind of show the fact that those kind of objects that you have are really containers, and that you can kind of click in? I think you kind of did that, but maybe that prescription one that you've got there could be
just
a good example.
So a good way to think of this philosophically is the entire building is there. If you think of Tableau and the sort of the data model, the data structure within Tableau, that entire building is still there. Everything works the same. The elevators are still in the same place. All the machines are in the same place. We added a floor and a new entrance, but everything below that floor is still there. This is I talked about this as this is a robot that creates the joins for you. All you have to do is specify the relationship. So if you double click into one of those relationships tables, you get your old school static joins here. You can specify what type of join you want. You can also define joins here on calculated fields. We don't have that feature ready yet in relationships. You can't do relationships on calculated fields. So if you need to do a join on a calculated field, pulling two fields together as a key to relate to something else, you'll need to do that in this physical table view.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Other question? Oh, before I forget, because I did, there's a edit relationships dialog here. In that edit relationships dialog, you can add more than one field, so you can relate on multiple fields if you need to. And there's this caret here that you can click to get performance options.
Oh, cool.
Only go here if you know what you're doing and you know the answers in the data source that you're going against. But you can specify cardinality here. And so if you know the cardinality of the underlying data set, you can give Tableau a hint and you might cause it to optimize its queries. You can also specify referential integrity. So if you know that the underlying data source is maintaining referential integrity on your behalf, you can specify that here. And again, that'll enable Tableau to optimize some of its query decisions. So that's the performance options part of the relationship dialog. Again, don't go there if you don't know what you're doing. But if you do, you can potentially speed up queries.
Well, it has been super helpful. There's a handful more questions, but we will address some of those. Ward, I'll follow up with you in the chat, and really appreciate you in talking us through this. This is some awesome stuff from Tableau. The ability to do the many-to-many relationships has been something that I know has always been a limitation for many years, and so excited to now be able to do that.
We are so thrilled to have finally shipped it. And,
yeah, exactly.
And it's working and it's fast. It seems really stable, and we'll continue to innovate on it. Be sure to put your feedback in the give your feedback to Tableau as to what you want to see next and what issues that you see. I've already done so with a couple of things. So thanks a lot, everybody.